interesting expression because if you had a Canadian commentator in the room, he'd probably correct you and say, please don't call them tar sands, call them oil sands. And in some jurisdictions there'd be a political hot potato, but the oil sands are here. They're a big part of how our hydrocarbon equation emerges as we go forward for the next 10-20 years. So who's got, let's say, who's got the biggest clout as far as the oil sands dynamic goes, and for sure it's Canada, and more specifically the province of Alberta. Now the oil sands are huge because they are at the present moment in time the mainstay of the Canadian oil and gas business. Now let me explain the whole sort of oil sands, tar sands dynamic, as it were. Now essentially what it is the substitute is bitumen, and the oil is trapped in the bitumen. So basically it is a very carbon intensive process of first extracting the bitumen, then subjecting it to steam and other processes to then release a sort of sticky mass, which would then eventually yield oil, and hence the word sort of oil sands, which is what a lot of Canadians would prefer to call it. And essentially, you might have heard of the Keystone XL pipeline. The United States is a huge market for Canada. It's their number one market for exporting Canadian crude, and there is a lot of debate in the States whether A, they actually do need the oil, B, whether how environmentally friendly these oil sands are, and should the US really be getting Canadian oil. The Canadians have a more defensive position. They say that the oil sands are going to be developed, and that's the sort of thick of it. Now the way I see it is that the oil sands, the Canadian oil sands, are going to come to market. The product from the oil sands will come to the market. Whether the Americans eventually end up taking it or buying it is an entirely different matter. Now, why do I say that? Because let's say this whole sort of politics that the Keystone XL pipeline is caught in, and America eventually decides not to agree to that pipeline. We're in the world of hypothetical things there. So let's say the US refuses to build the pipeline. The Canadians are already exploring alternatives of sort of pulling pipelines from Alberta to British Columbia and using their coastline to export to the Far East. And that is where bulk of the demand is. I keep, like a broken record, I keep coming back to it, but that is where bulk of the demand is. Now, 4 years ago when I visited Calgary, the capital of Alberta, I got a sense that if you walk around downtown Calgary, you will see a heavy presence of some of these Asian NOCs investing into the oil sands. So whether we're talking Chinese companies, whether we're talking Korean companies, the odd Japanese player, and of course India's ONGC. So these guys are there and they want the product. It's as simple as that. There are environmental question marks, and it's a very heated debate. There are people arguing on both sides of it, but I do see the oil sands developing. And also, let's not forget, if you look at IEA data, that will tell you that purely on the basis of their bituminous crude reserves position, Canada is now only second to Saudi Arabia in terms of proven reserves going forward. So if we are looking at the next 50 years in terms of how the fossil fuel market is going to look, Canada already is a major player and would want to increase its footprint. So this will get caught like the sort of discussion that we're having in Europe about shale. This discussion about the Canadian oil sands will continue. But that said, they will come to the market. And let me lead on to sort of the wider dynamic. They're not the only ones who have the oil sands. Venezuela is another another key market. And if you look at how PDVSA, the national oil company in Venezuela, is playing its card, is that it also has a very balanced viewpoint on oil sands, because it is a central plank of Venezuelan extraction policy. They are as much in this sticky mess as the Canadians, and if you look at it from their standpoint, they need a very unrealistic $162 to $165 per barrel oil price for their fiscal break-evens. So things are pretty bad in Venezuela. And could the country default? It is possible. In fact, a lot of commentators have a very negative outlook on Venezuela, and this of course feeds into the wider issue of where the oil price is. They need $160 plus. It's not going there anytime soon. In fact, it's not going there for quite a while.